It is time now for Florida Ceiling, the goaltending edition. All set of tenders, floor and ceiling before opening up the floor to Bryan Hayes and Martin Biron to discuss. Bryan, we're going to start with you. Jack Campbell signed a 5-year, $25 million deal in Edmonton. Year one, a nightmare, 3.41 goals against, an .888 save percentage. The ceiling, he reclaims the starter's job from Stu Skinner. The floor, he's a buyout candidate by the end of the season. Where do you land?
I am going to start with the ceiling on this, Gino. Jack Campbell did not forget how to play goaltender. It looked like it at times last year.
Certainly looked like it.
Admittedly, it looked like it at times last year. 2 years ago, he was an all-star. It was a new team, a lot of money, and a significant adjustment. So I think Jack Campbell will bounce back. But on top of that, Stuart Skinner, this is not Carey Price in his prime, right? Stuart Skinner still has a lot to prove. There is a chance Jack Campbell could reclaim the number one job by default. So I think taking that into consideration, I will go with the ceiling on this.
I hope we don't agree on everything from now until the end of the segment, but I agree with you, Hayes, on this one. Look, Jack Campbell figured it out at the end of the season last year. He was pushing Stuart Skinner for starts, for important starts, and even in the playoffs. Look, it was Jack Campbell's chance maybe to reclaim a little something in the season, and I do believe one off season away from all of that to refresh, to come back even stronger. I think Jack Campbell is going to have a really good season with the Edmonton Oilers, and there's always that question mark with Stuart Skinner. How did the playoffs last year affect him going into this next season?
It's going to be interesting to see how last season affects both of them moving forward. Okay, Marty, Jacob Markstrom's coming up next. He had a 2.92 goals against, .892 save percentage last year. 2 years ago, he was nominated for the Vezina with a 2.22 GAA and a .922 save percentage. His floor, last year's numbers. His ceiling, his Vezina caliber numbers from 2 years ago.
Okay, so I'm not a big Jacob Markstrom fan, but I'm going to go with the ceiling on this one because Jacob Markstrom was a victim of everything that happened in the locker room last year in Calgary and with the team. I think he's a very good goaltender, not my type of goaltender, but I'm thinking we're going to go to the ceiling and much more where he was 2 years ago with these Calgary Flames that are going to really put a priority on defending, and it's going to help Jacob Markstrom. So I'm looking at the ceiling with Markstrom, numbers close to where they were 2 years ago.
Yeah, he's a yo-yo goalie, right, Marty? His last year in Vancouver, he was very good. His first year in Calgary, he struggled. 2 years ago, he was all-world. Last year, he was really horrible. But it was a mess in Calgary. There's no disputing that. Now, I'm a little bit concerned. You said that they're going to concentrate more defensively. That was the definition of Daryl Sutter hockey. Daryl Sutter's not there anymore. Transition to a new coach actually, I think, could hurt Markstrom. But he's a pro. He's a very good goalie, and he yo-yos. I believe he moves back towards the ceiling.
I love the fact that Martin is saying that Markstrom was a victim of the guys in front of him, spoken like a true former
Always
NHL
their
goalie.
fault.
Always
it's never
their
the
fault.
goalie's
Yeah,
fault.
protect them.
All right. Bryan, next up, Joseph Woll. He played 4 games in the playoffs for Toronto last year. His floor, a return to the Marlies in the American Hockey League. His ceiling, becoming the number 1 goalie for the Leafs this season.
I'm being very nice to the goalies here, Gino. I'm going with the ceiling again. Look at me, the goalie protector.
Goalie
Usually
hugger.
I hammer at the goalies. But I'm actually going to go with the ceiling here, again, because I'm playing the odds. Obviously, there is a starting goaltender here in Samsonov. He is the starter as of right now in Toronto, but he's only on a 1-year deal. He is still in a prove-it portion of his career. By no means is he locked in long-term as the number 1 guy. So I think the door is open. He's also had some injury problems and inconsistency issues throughout his career. So if Samsonov falls off a little bit, the door opens for Woll. It's also been a long time in Toronto since they had a kid they drafted, they developed, they cultivated, and they eventually let go. Basically, Felix Potvin 30 years ago. I'm rooting for that story. I'm soft on the goalies here. I'm rooting for it, but I think
sounds like you're rooting against Samsonov.
No, in a way, I might be a little
sounds
bit.
like that.
I think you're right about that, Gino. But I like Woll. He was really good in the American Hockey League. He looked really good in limited time in the NHL last year, including in the playoffs. I think he's a really good young goalie.
And Bryan, because you mentioned a couple of things, the development of a goaltender, I'm going to go to the floor on this one because I think this is the year for Ilya Samsonov, and he will take the reins unless there's an injury. I don't think there's going to be enough net action, enough game action for Joseph Woll to continue to develop. So I'm going to go to the floor. I'm going to say time in the American League and dominating the American League may be better for Joseph Woll eventually to get to the NHL and have that maturity to his game and know what it's like to really carry the load in the AHL and play a lot of games. But this all relies on Samsonov. So it's kind of a trick question, but I'm going to go to the floor with Woll and say it's more of a starter with the Marlies.
All right, other end of the scale now from goaltending standpoint, pending unrestricted free agent Connor Hellebuyck, the floor. He's dealt by the deadline. The ceiling, a long-term extension in Winnipeg. Marty.
I'm going to go to ceiling with Connor Hellebuyck. Why? Because they explored the market over the summertime and realized that there's nobody out there that's willing to give an 8-year or 7-year deal to a goalie that's going to be 33 years old when this contract expires and wants $9 million. So I don't think there's a market right now for Connor Hellebuyck. And he's such a big piece of the Winnipeg Jets. The Jets have to say, we have a goalie, and it's hard to replace that type of goaltender. So they surrounded him with Brossoit, and they're going to help him this year. He's not going to play 65 games and all these minutes. But I do believe that it's more about the ceiling. He will remain a Winnipeg Jets long-term, and they'll figure it out.
I'm going to go with the floor on this one. I didn't love what he had to say at media when he's talking about pursuing a cup. If he's being legitimate about that, I don't see how it connects with Winnipeg the way they're built right now. I think, again, he's looking for a lot of money. They may be desperate enough to give it to him. Yeah. He's a huge part of what they do. Mark Scheifele's in a similar spot. Winnipeg may do that to keep the band together. But I think if they struggle this year and they get up to the trade deadline and he has professed that he's looking for a ton of money or possibly leaving anyway, I think it would be malpractice not to flip him. Yeah. So I'll go with the floor.
All right, for the record, in the last 20 NHL seasons, only 2 goalies on Canadian teams have won the Vezina. Carey Price in 2014 and Connor Hellebuyck in 2020.